Turn 1 is here to get you ready for the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix. We're your host, Thomas.
And Jeremiah.
While I don't think the hometown kid Yuki Tsunoda is going to go for his first victory this weekend,
not.
We are here to take you through a short recap of last year's events and then bring it into 2024. Who do we think is going to win? What does the track kind of look like? And ultimately give predictions. Before we get started, though, I do want to plug the turn1podcast.myshopify.com merch store. We've got a couple things available over there. You can get your classic Vamos Checo shirt. Keep in mind, this works for any team that he's on if he's not on Red Bull anymore. We also have the Daniel Ricciardo special, Lick the Stamp and Send It. That's available. And then a couple more things, one of which is... You can see why we worded it this way. I support the Blue Energy Drink Racing Company. So all of that and much more is available at turn1podcast.myshopify.com. Let's get into last year's Japanese Grand Prix, though. Where do you want to start?
Probably off the start, man. The start was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Between Sergio Perez playing bumper cars and Alex Albon going flying in the background. I mean, plenty of action to look at.
Here's the weird thing about last year's race. The Japanese Grand Prix is now in the spring, in April, whereas last year and in previous seasons, if I remember correctly, it's always a fall race.
Yeah.
Last year was in September. What weird dynamic shift did we have between this point last year and where the race was last year?
Didn't it rain last race?
It might have rained. What I'm getting more at is McLaren was on fire for last year's Japanese Grand Prix.
But I'm just thinking because at the end of the season, isn't it typically like monsoon season in Japan?
I don't think it rained last year. We watched the race. I didn't remember seeing rain.
Maybe
There was
they're trying to avoid the possibility of.
Yeah, there was a Japanese Grand Prix. There was a couple that got rained out.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, big time ones that had big accidents happen at them, if you remember correctly. But the weird thing about last year was that he mentioned Sergio Perez playing bumper cars. It's because he started in like 6th or 7th position.
Typical of last year.
Whereas Max lines up first row on the grid with 2 McLarens right on him.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri coming in at second, lining up on the front of the grid with him. And then he had Lando Norris right behind him.
Yeah. And so off the start of the race, Max is immediately running Oscar into the wall.
Yeah.
And then here comes Lando up the outside. Now he's got to go back and push Lando wide off the track. And then in the background you see, was it bumping Alonso? Is that who Sergio was hitting?
No, so Sergio Perez went inside to cover off the Ferrari. I don't know if it was Sainz or Leclerc. But then that Ferrari pushes him wide, sending him to the outside where he's now playing bumper cars with, was it a Mercedes?
Yeah, maybe George or Lewis.
I should know this. Regardless, it was definitely a Mercedes. I don't know which one it was. But Sergio Perez goes flying inside to try and cover off the Ferrari, then gets pushed way outside into the Mercedes, causing the Mercedes to go way outside to try and avoid everything. It was very messy.
So as you get through the race a little bit, though, you have quite a few DNFs in this race, and we started with Valtteri Bottas, who got booted off the track by none other than the American hero Logan Sargent.
Locked up into the corner, went deep, pushed Valtteri right off.
You had a very uncharacteristic moment for Sergio Perez. He was battling Kevin Magnussen, trying to work his way back up through the field, and Sergio 100% dove into a turn that he should not have dove into. And he ends up hitting K-Mag, and K-Mag gets out of it relatively unscathed, but Sergio DNFs.
My favorite thing about this, before we continue down this DNF train, my favorite thing about this race, without a doubt, is the insane battle that we saw between Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, who went wheel to wheel for 2 straight laps, it felt like, where every single corner, every turn, everything, they were just right next to each other.
This was in Liam's 5 or 6 race run that he had with the AlphaTauri team last year after he came in for the injured Daniel Ricciardo. And he had a point to prove. And the fact that he took it to the hometown driver, Yuki, for that entire race, they went through so many turns together side by side.
Yeah,
doing the switchbacks and everything. It was such clean driving for both of them. I was highly impressed with Liam. I don't think he didn't finish in the points.
No, neither one did.
Who else did we see a really good race from last year? The Mercedes drivers.
Oh, man. This one was kind of bad because here again we see George whining because he finally gets in a good battle with somebody. At this point, it was his teammate, Lewis Hamilton. And he comes on and he's like, what are we doing? Are we fighting each other or fighting for points or whatever the heck he said? Yeah. Regardless, it's just a typical George coming on whining because he's not getting his way and he gets passed by Lewis Hamilton, shoved way off the track, to be fair. But still.
We'll come back to that dynamic here in a minute. You had a couple other DNFs last year. Lance Stroll DNF'd, Logan Sargent DNF'd, and Alex Albon, unfortunately, DNF'd. Alex Albon had a little bit of collateral damage from the very start of the race.
Right.
He was bumped around in the back of the field by the Alfa
caught
Romeo
air.
Bottas. Yeah. So you had all that going on. Both of the Haas's finish out of the points. I wanted to get back to the Hamilton and Russell thing. As we're coming to the final 3 laps of the race, this was lap 49 or 50 out of a 53-lap race, Lewis Hamilton is behind George Russell, and Carlos Sainz is behind Lewis Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
George is on a little bit rougher tires.
Right.
Lewis is getting DRS with George, and they're kind of running, they're rolling together pretty smooth. And what does Mercedes do?
Comes on to George's earpiece there, and he says, George, we're swapping the cars. To which George said, can't this wait till the last lap to help me fight off Carlos or something to that effect, which is what he was intending to. And the race engineer was like, it's an order, George.
So on lap 49, they swap Lewis and George. And then on lap 50, at the very same spot they had swapped cars the previous lap, Carlos flies past George Russell.
DRS, nobody helping him battle him off. Gone.
I thought that was a bad strategic call by Mercedes.
Maybe, but it's the call that they made, and at the end of the day, you really aren't supposed to argue. So, it made me lose points for Mercedes just because it was a bad strategic call, but it also made me lose points for George Russell just because of the fact that he had to whine about it.
The last note I have, a really good strategic call was McLaren flipping Norris and Piastri. Piastri was running he was running in second at the time. In the actual race order, it was like third, but Carlos was up there and he was going to drop back. So you had Piastri running and then you had Norris. And as the race finishes, of course, Max Verstappen wins, and he wins by 19.3 seconds. So Norris comes in second at 19.3, Piastri at 36.49.
Yes, 17 seconds back.
So Norris was cooking compared to Piastri.
Yeah, well, Norris had come on. I want to say it was either a lap or two before they even made the switch. And he kept complaining about the fact that he was way faster, way faster, way faster. And finally, they made the order, switched the cars, and Norris wins by 17 seconds over his teammates. So, I mean, rightfully so. He deserved it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Sometimes the team orders calls are very weird to me because they always seem like they're at weird places. Like, for example, if they had not switched the McLarens until the very last lap, literally nothing would have changed. It was still a McLaren 2-3.
But do you then have, instead of them finishing, 20 seconds ahead of Charles, would it have set up a battle between Charles and the McLarens maybe?
Possibly.
If you're holding Lando up.
And the Ferraris.
Okay, so the key note from the Japanese Grand Prix, though, that is where Red Bull clinched the Constructors last year.
Yep.
Max did not have the drivers yet. I mean, mathematically, he had the drivers.
Let me put it this way: at the end of that race, Max had 400 even, and Sergio Perez in second place had 223 points. It was clinched,
and there was only like 6 races left in the year.
But mathematically, if Max just DNF'd the rest of the season somehow, and Sergio Perez won every single race, got the fastest lap and the sprint races, technically he could have won.
Okay, let's move into talking a little bit of 2024. I don't know where the Suzuka Circuit ranks in my top tracks, but I think it's a guaranteed top 10, probably a little bit higher than 10.
Favorite corner, turn 15, 130R. Flat out, all out, just balling around this corner.
Why is it called 130R?
Because the radius of the turn is 130 degrees.
They're very original in their F1 naming conventions.
130.
Yeah, it's 130 degrees because it's opened up.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite corner. But we also have the S's, just like we do see on multiple tracks throughout the year. Plenty of long straights. I mean, it's got kind of a mixed bag of everything that you want in a track, and that's personally why it's one of my favorites. What do you think?
I agree. I like 130. I don't know if it's the best place on the track. I think the S curves is where we get a lot of the wheel to wheel. That's where we saw the AlphaTauris battling last year, going through those S curves, and that's just impressive when they're going from turns 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and they're switching at every single turn because one has the inside and the other has the inside, and they're just going back and forth. I think that's super, super impressive. I always love a good hairpin, and at Suzuka between 10 and 11, you have a hairpin. It slows everybody way, way down because they between 9 and 10 they are able to get up to pretty much full speed, and then you're slamming on your brakes going to that turn. That's where we saw Bottas get booted out by Logan Sargent last year. Was that the hairpin?
I think so.
If my memory serves me correct. And then you have finally the spoon curve, which is 13 to 14, which is not a full speed turn by any means, but a pretty fast turn.
And if you get a good exit on it, it sets you up for that long straight and then into 130R still flat out.
It's kind of like the two ends of the Jeddah Corniche circuit, how you can take those turns. You don't have to slow down too much.
What we see a lot of in that turns 13, 14, 15 area is if you get that good clean exit on turn 14 out of the spoon curve, and then you get that long straight off of a beautiful exit, you have all of that ground to cover. And then by the time you get into 130R, let's say you're wheel to wheel, if you go on the inside, you can push the other person out wide, you get that overtake.
Let's look at some of the points implications for this season. Where is Ferrari right now in the points?
They're second, but they're like, what, 4 points behind Red Bull?
They are 4 points. I was trying to pull it up just to make sure we get it right. Okay. Crazy scenario to throw at you before we get to predictions.
You're wrong, but go ahead.
Max finishes first.
Obviously.
Ferraris go 2-3.
Again. With them being on the podium.
And Sergio being like out of the top 5.
Jeez.
What if that Ferrari takes the lead?
Yeah. Okay. Let's dissect this a little bit.
If Ferrari can pull off a 2-3 in almost all the races and hope for a couple more technical issues out of the Red Bulls, they don't really have a chance, let's be honest, but they kind of have a chance.
Let's dissect this a little bit because we did have a pattern from Sergio last year where he would have a spout of a rough race and then come back strong after all the doubters are going on to him, and he comes back and has a heck of a showing. I see Sergio bouncing back strong this race. I think that that's not going to happen for the Ferraris, but it's definitely a strong possibility.
The Ferraris have pace.
They do.
This is a pace circuit.
And the
McLarens also have pace. Maybe they battle each other, take each other out.
the McLarens, they aren't on pace with the Ferraris just yet. I feel like I'm starting to notice that as the season's progressing. It's like last year at the end of the year, it was a clear and obvious take that the McLarens were the number 2 fastest car on the grid, and Ferrari had some making up to do. But it seems to me, as we're progressing through this season, this year, the Ferraris have the pace over the McLarens. Mercedes is almost a definite 4th at this point. And unless we see some major upgrades, which it's starting to get that deep into the season where we might see some teams bring in some smaller upgrades. So I don't put it past them, but I don't see it likely.
When you look at the point standings, that all rings true. You have Red Bull at 97, Ferrari at 93, drop down to McLaren at 55, drop down again to Mercedes at 26.
Now you have to put things in perspective. Jesus. You have to put things into perspective. You have both Mercedes going out in the last race. 0 points for Mercedes. So that gap shouldn't necessarily be that big, but it is because they both DNF'd. As far as the Red Bull-Ferrari gap, that's only a thing because Max Verstappen didn't finish the race. He was on pace to win, even though he got passed on lap 1. We all knew what was going to happen. I mean, he's far and away the best driver and the best car on the grid, and that's still the case for this season.
Let's do a little predictions here. Let's give top 3 and then a wild card.
Okay.
Let's do top 3 first, and then we'll switch to wild card because I need a second to think about that. Top 3, I'm going to go Max Verstappen, and I just want a good race. So give me Charles Leclerc in the 2nd spot and give me Lando Norris in the 3rd spot.
Okay.
I want it to be interesting.
I'm going to go a little bit more conservative. We're going to go Max Verstappen in the 1 spot. Give me Carlos Sainz in the 2nd spot.
Yeah.
And give me Sergio Perez in the 3rd spot.
I could see it. I would rather Carlos finish higher than Charles for reasons we pointed out before, but I think Charles is due.
I'll take it just one step further. Give me Red Bull, Ferrari, giving Charles Leclerc that 4th spot.
Okay. For my wild card, I've got 2 for you. 1, give me both McLarens in the top 5 to take a definitive lead over Mercedes, which they already have. And give me the hometown boy Yuki Tsunoda to squeeze in the points.
I don't like that.
Maybe just 1 point, but give me a point.
I don't like that. Give me Nico Hülkenberg in 9th.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think your last 2 predictions wildcard have included Nico Hülkenberg.
And they will continue to until Haas takes a definite lead over Visa Cash App Racing Bulls.
Oh, man. Okay, guys, let us know in the comments who's going to finish on top this season. Mercedes currently has 26 points, or Aston Martin with 25 points.
Guys, if you think Yuki Tsunoda is going to be the first Japanese driver to win the Japanese Grand Prix since 1975, I think I'm riding on board with you.
All right, guys, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.